Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 6th episode of the Startup Boston podcast, where I interview entrepreneurs, investors, and influencers in the Boston startup community to uncover actionable advice and stories from their experiences. I figured today's interview was the perfect one to follow up the previous episode, where I interviewed Sam Salters of Core DNA, and he talks a bit about getting users on board and getting them to use the features available on your platform. Today's episode is with Jonathan Kim of Appcues, whose product is focused solely on that. Appcues is a user onboarding company for software companies. In this episode, Jonathan talks about what most companies get wrong about user onboarding, when companies should start automating their user onboarding, how to use UX to gain the customer's trust, amongst many other things. As always, I provided links to everything mentioned in the show notes, which can be found at startupbostonpodcast.com. Enjoy the episode. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Can you start by giving us a little bit of information about your background?
Yeah, so I used to work at HubSpot. I guess I left there 2013. I was a software engineer there working on social media products. I'd worked on a bunch of other things too, like the analytics system, worked on like email reporting stuff. And I got to HubSpot by way of this company called Performable. It's David Cancel's startup that he started in 2010. And we got acquired by HubSpot in 2011. And before that, I was a journalism major at Boston University, just down the street from here. And I thought I wanted to be a journalist I wanted to be a writer when I graduated from high school. I'm from Hawaii, and I just chose the top 5 best journalism programs in the nation and early accepted to all of them. And I wound up at BU. And about my sophomore to junior year, I realized, I took some programming jobs on the side and on campus because they helped me pay for school. And by my sophomore and junior year, I realized that I didn't want to be a journalist. I wanted to be a software engineer, or I wanted to start my own company and just make things. And I got really lucky out of school and ended up winding up at Performable. The rest is history.
What attracted you to want to be a software engineer?
In the same way that I chose which school I would go to, I just took a list of whatever the best paying jobs were on campus and ordered them by how much they paid, just because I had to pay for school.
Right.
And so I just took the highest paying job I could find. And, I would reevaluate that every so often. And from the on-campus job to off-campus jobs that I found, like software engineering continued to pay a lot of money. And I found I spent a lot of time doing it, like just for fun or just for like other projects. It was really fun to make stuff.
How did you learn?
I really cut my teeth on it. I built these like really terrible PHP apps for the computer lab that I was working at. I had a really great boss who let me kind of tinker around with those things. But, Computer Lab has a ticketing system. They've sort of got like their own internal ops things. And he let me build those things pretty much from nothing, or from like a kind of terrible system they had before, and make it slightly less terrible, maybe. And I just kind of got deeper down the rabbit hole from there.
So you're pretty much self-taught then, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, everything. I've definitely never gone to school for this, so.
Wow. So how did you begin Appcues? What was your inspiration for that?
Yeah, so if you've ever played around with HubSpot, you know that it's a really powerful product. The downside is that it's huge. And when I was at HubSpot, building front end particularly, I was building all these interfaces and spending a lot of time doing that. And what I found was that I could spend a ton of time belaboring over this beautiful interface, but the customers weren't going to just find it on their own. HubSpot doesn't have a self-service business. The way they onboard customers to their product is a high-touch sales team, an awesome account management team who you pay, I think, $1,000 setup fee to train you on how to use the product. And then they've got this humongous but awesome support team. And so the way in which they solved the problem of onboarding was with people. And me as a product person, I really wanted to solve things with product. I wanted it to sort of just stand on its own. And it was just painful to me that people were having to pay to learn how to use the software that I made. And after a while, I got really frustrated with that. I started tinkering around to see if there were ways that we could solve that within HubSpot. And even other people on different teams were doing roughly the same thing. And at a certain point, I just got pretty frustrated. I started talking to other people outside of other companies and seeing if this was problems that other companies had. Was this just a HubSpot thing? And it turns out it wasn't. And, I watched a lot of other companies kind of start up and go away trying to solve the problem. And after a while, I got just frustrated enough to say, I've got to try to solve this myself.
So what is it that Appcues does?
Yeah, so Appcues is user onboarding software for software companies. So say you're a product marketer or product manager, a non-technical person at a software company, and you want to onboard your customers without having to work with developers, work through product management processes in order to get changes to happen in your app. You can use Appcues, do a one-time installation, typically takes like 20 minutes, and then you can create the ideal onboarding experience that you want. Be able to publish that to your customers immediately and update that at any time without having to know any code.
So if someone starts using your product, what kind of results can they expect for like feature adoption and user onboarding?
Yeah, I think, what we found is that the mileage people get out of it really depends on their frame of mind. With customers like AdRoll, they've seen just incredible results. We just did a case study with them, and I believe they said that they can get anybody to do anything, regardless of the goal, to 20% efficacy. So that means using Appcues, they know that they can guarantee that 1 in 5 people are going to do whatever they ask them to if they're using Appcues, which is pretty crazy. Other customers have shown us, like 83% or more increases in engagement. Wow. And it really depends on like being able to show the right message at the right time, and put yourself in the user's shoe and say like, how can I add value to somebody who's already using the product? Or how can I like show somebody who just signed up immediate value now, and the people who are able to do that really well get tons of mileage out of it.
How important was it to you to be able to provide a solution to your customers that allow them to implement your product without using any code?
I guess I have a couple of thoughts on that. One of the things that I thought leaving HubSpot was, here's this problem, user onboarding that I really feel passionately about. And one of the ways in which I could solve it is I could try to do consulting, 1-to-1 and fix it really well. And I thought that a more scalable way, because the problem is so widespread for every company, is to try to solve it with product. And I felt like requiring engineering in the middle of that would have been more towards the services side than to the product side. And so it was just absolutely necessary that people with the right information were able to do this by themselves. And I think really that's the other piece of it, is that at HubSpot, engineers were the people who were creating the onboarding experiences. They were in charge of doing that. They would work with product managers a little bit, and they would work with designers a little bit. But the people who actually were the best at onboarding customers are people in support, people in account management. But those people don't have any tools, right? They can't get into product. It's kind of a walled garden. Right. And so I wanted to create a product that was in the hands of the right person, and they can use their judgment and they can use their experience to actually create an awesome onboarding experience for their customers.
What do you think most companies get wrong about user onboarding?
That's a tough one. I think the biggest tragedy when it comes to user onboarding is that, in marketing is super sophisticated. On the marketing website and on your landing pages and in your emails for marketing, they treat everybody like a special snowflake. Every lead, is personalized. Every website is personalized. Everything that you see is really tailored just to you. And, you eventually find something that says like, oh, wow, that's really cool. Like, that's a great value prop. I'm going to sign up for that. And then the second you get into the app, they treat you all the same, right? They just totally forget all the special targeted marketing that they had built up and try to sell you on one piece of the value of that product. And they just try to show you everything, or let you try to like find what you were looking for without helping you. Because they just drop all that personalization. They just stop caring, or they don't carry it over. And so people who sign up looking for something don't immediately find it. And that's where the huge drop-off rates come from.
So it's important to provide that same dynamic experience in the onboarding process as well as the marketing materials and stuff.
Yeah.
What do you think is the best way for a company to go about driving adoption of new features?
I think there's a bunch of different ways to do it. It really depends on like finding the person who actually will get the most value out of it. So if you've got a new feature like, using HubSpot again as an example, I don't know, email automation or something like that. If you have never even like uploaded a list of people to email, you're probably not ready to start automating your emails. And so just finding the people who are actually going to get value out of that and just saying, hey, now you are ready for this, and graduating them into new features, I think that's a great way to do it. And we use Appcues for Appcues as well. And we take that same thing into consideration when we try to onboard users to new features. The engineering team actually does their own onboarding for features that they ship. So they go into Appcues, they say, okay, who is this relevant for? What's the right pattern to show it to them? Should I call it out in a little tooltip? Is this big enough that needs like a full screen, announcement? Are there other subtle patterns that we can use to sort of hint at this? And then they go and they do the feature announcement. So it really depends on the type of feature, like the importance of it, and your granularity of targeting.
In terms of user onboarding, do you think that all companies should focus on this, or only companies in certain like stages of growth?
Yeah. We wrote this article on startups.com. Dharmesh was actually nice enough to help us out with that one. We basically think that what we found in ourselves and from other companies is that if you've never onboarded customers before, especially manually, you're not ready to automate it, right? And Appcues is really about onboarding customers in an automated way or at scale. The people who are not successful with a product like Appcues, or even onboarding in general in a sophisticated manner, are ones who have not actually onboarded their customers manually first. You can sort of create this like magical onboarding experience in a vacuum, but if you've never actually talked to customers, interacted with them, and tried to find out exactly what they're looking for, you're probably going to just make something that's wildly off. Mm-hmm. And so people who sign up for us who, are pre-product, or who are really early stage, we do our best to tell them like, hey, like, this is good. Like, I'm glad you're thinking about it, but you should really take some time to talk to customers, try to onboard them, and then use Appcues to automate the things that you find yourself doing repetitively.
Okay. Can you explain more about what user onboarding is? Because I think a lot of people might just be thinking of like those swipes through screens, and it's really so much more than that.
Yeah. I think the swipe through screens are actually quite terrible, in fact. And what do you think of them?
Yeah, I think they're pretty bad. It's just like, this is all of the features and you just swipe through each one. It's not really anything that's based on who you are and what you're going to be using it for.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think whoever came up with that probably worked for like the first 20 apps that launched that. And then everybody sort of just copied it since then. Even Apple actually says that you shouldn't have those in their like style docs hidden somewhere. Yeah, user onboarding, the way that we think about user onboarding is that initial impression that people have of your product. So the second that they sign up, how do you take somebody from like initially seeing it and having sort of some experience with it all the way to the point at which they find what they're looking for, that aha moment is what we talk about. And that's onboarding. You can also think of it, sort of as like outside of onboarding, but this whole experience of what new really is to the user. New is really relative, right? So if I shipped a new feature 6 months ago, but a customer signed up today, to them it's technically new. And the point at which they become qualified to actually start using it, we think of that also as part of the life cycle of onboarding. So helping somebody become, go from a complete newbie to an absolute master of your product, that's sort of like the really long term view of onboarding. But, ultimately that's the goal, right? We want somebody to just be a complete master. And that's always changing as you release new features, as you announce like new parts of your product, new ways to use it. So we think of our job as like pretty ongoing.
So it's not just when someone first signs up for like product or service, it's this ongoing process that can go on for like months or years maybe? Yeah,
forever. I mean, as long as your product is evolving and you expect people to be learning different parts of it or growing more into it, you should always be doing onboarding. If your customers already know everything about your product and you don't plan to change any parts of it, you probably don't need onboarding, but I don't think anybody's has that goal.
Plans on not changing anything.
Yeah.
What do you think frustrates users the most for onboarding?
I think, a lot of people blame people like these massive drop-offs in engagement in products to users just being fickle nowadays. But people sign up for a reason, right? They see something or heard something or were told something. And so they signed up looking for something. They use your product because they want something. And kind of going back to what I said about like the biggest mistake people make, I really think the thing that annoys people the most is when they spend time looking for the value that they were promised and they don't find it. So, if you sign up for a product saying that it's going to, save you $20 a day or something like that, and you don't figure out how to save $20 a day within the first 10 minutes, you're going to bounce.
From a user's point of view, what about when it comes to design? What tends to frustrate them the most?
My thoughts on those have really changed over time. You look at apps like Fasten, I would tell you, rewind like 5 years, a younger me would have told you like, oh, user experience is everything. Like it's got to be perfect. If it doesn't work immediately, people are going to uninstall and they're going to bounce. But, you look at apps like Fasten or Lyft who ran really aggressive campaigns to just give people back money, right? And so like they were like $5 anywhere when Fasten first launched. Even Pokemon Go, looking recently, like you can't even use the app sometimes and people are crazy about it, right? Like there were whole days where people couldn't use it and they never uninstalled it. They just kept going back to it. It's not the most beautifully designed app. Everything is clunky. And it's really about demand, right? Like if you can help people find that thing that they're looking for and you can continue to prove to them or promise them and hold their trust that it's going to fulfill whatever they were looking for, you can actually do a lot. You can actually like abuse that if you want a lot. As long as you eventually deliver on it and the value is worth it to them, customers will do surprisingly like arcane things for it.
So going off of gaining the user's trust, how can a company use the design to gain the trust of the user?
Yeah. And what we've been digging a lot into the psychology behind trust. Julia, who just recently joined our team, just wrote a blog post about that. And, there's a lot of like things you can do, for instance, like bigger font, doing things with copy and sort of presentation. So there's a lot of things that you can do. I would definitely reference checking out that blog post for a deeper dive into it. I think there's the tactical things that you can do, like simple tweaks like that. And there's also just more human things, especially as startups, right? Like showing who your team actually is, showing that there are real people behind it. One of the things that we recommend to all companies who are pretty small when they're using Appcues is to give a founder's welcome. I think companies like Wistia and Litmus do a really good job of this. It's just, hey, you sign up for this product. Let us introduce you into the people who are actually making it every day, right? And you kind of build this human connection. I think in a lot of ways like that builds trust and it builds credibility and it also sort of personifies the product.
How does that work? Is that just like, do you have like a call with the people or is it like an email with like, this is the team, this is who they are? Is that what it is? Or
yeah. For the basic case, what we recommend to people is just have a picture of your founders on a mobile or like introductory screen that you have in your product, and just a little note from them, and just have it signed off. It says like from so and so founder or whatever.
Okay.
And we see effectiveness from this. And you can also read all these articles about emails sent from the founder of some company. Like open significantly more. And why is that, right? It's because people appreciate it. Even though they know, a lot of people know it's automated, still build that connection. But companies like Litmus do it really well, where they just have a video of every member of the team just waving hello to customers right after they sign up for the product. And that's simple. It's quick. It took them no time at all. But it really introduces you to the whole team. And it's kind of cool that a company goes out of their way to say like, meet everybody,
Yeah. It's interesting because it's like, then helps you realize that this isn't just a thing, right? There are people behind this thing that are making it work for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you go about giving the useful information to people, such as like feature adoption and user onboarding, without having the user feel as if they're being spammed by all these things coming at them?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we think about constantly. That's one of our biggest challenges in a lot of ways. Just like an email tool or just like a advertising tool or anything like that. Appcues in a lot of ways is really powerful, especially once it's in your product. And so our job, even though we don't explicitly tell it to customers, is to make sure or influence them to make great content, right? Because if they don't create great content, if they create spammy experiences, their customers are going to hate it. They're going to end up not being successful with the product. The results that they get with Appcues are going to suck. And then they're going to blame us, right? Because they're not getting results. And we want the opposite, which is we want their customers to love it so that they convert and engage more. So if they see great results with us and they continue to be an Appcues customer and say how effective we are. And so we do a lot of things, like we write this academy, Appcues Academy, on how to onboard customers. We give it out to everybody. We're constantly tweaking it and updating it. A lot of content. We've got a lot of docs, a lot of use case driven docs too, to show people like, here's how to do different things. We're creating a gallery of customer content, so you can actually see the ways people are using Appcues and get ideas from that.
Interesting.
A lot of the small things too, just copy that we use. We call the things that you create with Appcues, we call them flows, like workflows or user flows, which a designer would use, right? A marketer would call something like that a campaign. And other products do that too. And so we want people to think in terms of like a user experience designer, even if their actual title at a company is product manager or product marketer or account manager. We want them to think and feel and act like somebody who would be designing a product, because that's what they're doing.
Do you find any customers that are using it in an interesting way that was different from what you intended?
There's definitely a really long tail of use cases. When we first started, I was all about just initial user onboarding. Feature adoption has become like the new use case that's really rising up the ranks. But we see new stuff all the time. People are using it to like block others out of, a trial. People are using it to, like, surveys is a really big one. We've got a little form tool, and people are using it to ask customers like how healthy they are, NPS, triggering those responses into like a Slack channel so that the account manager who's in charge of that customer like is updated whenever something happens.
Yeah.
The ways in which people are using it are always fascinating. And even beyond that, our styling is, I think, pretty good for the defaults, but people have taken it way beyond anything we had initially dreamed of. So just fully styling to look native to their product has been pretty cool.
Oh, nice. So they can customize it so it looks like their own product, pretty much.
Yeah.
Been the largest driver of growth here for you?
I would say, content. We haven't actually done any outbound. When it comes to just like growing the business, all of it's been inbound. I think the academy has been really helpful, especially early on.
Yeah.
Particularly as a content strategy, it's evergreen. It's something that, you can sort of incentivize people to sign up with email. And it establishes us as thought leaders. Nobody was really talking about this stuff before we got going. And so having our own academy has been really cool. We're starting to see some of the word of mouth gains. Once you're installed in somebody's product, people dig into the code sometimes and they try to figure out like what is this thing? Like, where did this come from? And we've got a little bit of branding for like free plans and smaller plans. So that kind of virality, once we start getting more numbers, just like more customers spread out, we'll just build up over time. It should be cool.
If you could start over, is there anything that you would do differently?
Man, that's a tough one.
Is there any big mistakes you made early on?
Yeah, I think I've definitely made a ton of mistakes. I think thankfully I haven't made any killer mistakes. I think if I could go back, one thing I wasted a lot of time on, when I was at HubSpot, like near the end, I thought like, okay, I want to go start my own thing. I need to start looking for a co-founder. I read all this stuff about single co-founder things, and a friend and I started working together a little bit, and that sort of fizzled out. And I just had a lot of anxiety. Maybe not a lot of anxiety, but it was definitely like something in the back of my mind about like, I got to find somebody, right? Like, and I did some like founder dating stuff. I signed up for like networks. I met a bunch of people, and I found it to be really inefficient. And somebody, along the way was like, hey, just keep going to these events. Like, you only got to get lucky once until you find the right person. And I spent a lot of energy on that. And pretty much the second I stopped worrying about that is when I met Jackson. So, I was trying to meet people one-to-one and none of them really worked out. And then at some point I was like, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to focus on building the business. And I just started going out to events and trying to pitch, just to raise awareness of what I was doing. And the way that Jackson and I found each other was about, 7 or 8 months in. I went to this event and he wasn't at the event, but he was on the mailing list, heard about user onboarding, and was like, oh my God, I just went through this. It was painful. I wish I'd known about you guys like 6 months ago. Can we meet? And what I realized is that rather than spending time trying to find somebody, which is a very one-to-one activity, it was a lot more effective if I just tried to build a business as best I could and try to raise my profile and get as much traction, because that will attract people. And that's then one-to-many, right? And it was a lot easier to sort of draw people to the problem who are actually authentic and genuine than sort of try to go after and chase down people who wanted to start something but maybe didn't have the same pain or same problem or same idea. So yeah, I would go back and tell myself to not spend so much time on that.
Yeah. How much time did you say you spent on that? 7 or 8 months?
Somewhere between 7 and 10 months.
Wow. It's a long time.
Yeah.
So a third of Appcues customers are international, and your product works in every language. Is that something that you had from the beginning, or is that something you developed later on? Yeah,
we kind of stumbled upon it, but it's been awesome. Actually, one of the things that I would highly recommend to any startup or SaaS company is trying to build for that, from the get-go. SaaS is a growing industry, and I think everything built with on the internet is growing really fast. But global markets are huge, right? I think everybody sort of kind of looks to the areas around them and tries to monopolize that. But nobody is really looking globally. And there's a lot of great businesses out there. Some of our best customers are actually based in Australia, and some of our most active customers are based in Europe. And so it's really cool to see that growth. And we kind of stumbled on that just by making our product super customizable. Initially, we just thought let them change all the text and let them change all the styling, and that will be enough. Mm-hmm. And what we found is that people wanted to use it in different languages, and the languages just worked because we let them change every piece of text. And since we let them do styling, they could even do the right to left languages, which is pretty cool. And it's just kind of been a free, not free, but an extra 30% of the business that, had we not made those decisions, might have been limiting.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool that we got that.
Nice.
And it's super hard to add that stuff later on. I mean, you probably know, working with engineers yourself, it's incredibly hard to internationalize after the fact.
Yeah, if you go in with the intention of doing that, it takes longer, right, initially to do it, but it's much easier than doing it way down the road when you have to go back and change everything so you can support that.
Yeah.
So all your engineers also do customer support, right? Can you talk a little bit about that and why you decided to have them do that?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So we think of ourselves in the business of empathy, in a lot of ways, helping our customers to create great content and be successful with their product. We ourselves have to be good at that. And in order to do that, we actually have to understand our customers really well. And so, in typical organizations, it's really hard for engineers naturally to actually hear what customers are struggling with, to build empathy with their actual problems. Because a lot of times they're insulated, right? They're insulated by support engineers or support people who catch all the problems that engineers are causing. They're insulated by product managers who cherry pick, what the best product or features are, or sort of cherry pick what problems to solve, and they solve them in bulk with some brand new feature or a rewrite. And the engineer never really hears that it's actually, a bunch of little problems, or what their actual customers' challenges are, or what their goals are. And by sharing customer support, by doing things like we just did, the fantasy draft, encourages our customers, or our team and our employees, to really dig in and understand our customers. And I think that, and we've seen that play out already, is it really helps engineers to prioritize and scope, and really feel like they're having an impact when they know exactly who they're building for. They can call them up on the phone if they need to, and they can keep the use cases in mind because they've heard them firsthand. They know what it means to somebody's business. It's just a lot more ownership and responsibility and impact.
Can you explain what the fantasy draft was?
Yeah, so we just finished this. What we wanted was we wanted to like share the responsibility of like making sure all of our customers are having a good time and using Appcues properly and seeing value out of it. We have Melissa who's in customer success, but she's only one person and she can't cover all of our customers herself. And so what we did is we broke into 4 teams and we basically did a draft pick among all of our customers. We pulled all this other data about their usage and stuff, and we literally just finished doing like a football style fantasy draft. Everyone had their own strategies. There was like meetings before. It was super fun. But the goal there is, we divvied up all the customers across the entire company. And so there is literally an engineer or 2 engineers actually on every team who's responsible for making sure that, certain groups of customers are happy. So, Adderall or it's not Canva, Indiegogo, like all these customers that we have like essentially 4 people who are constantly looking at their account, trying to like increase their health, trying to get them more engaged.
Do you find that the engineers enjoy doing that?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time we've ever done a draft. This is like just a brand new thing. There's definitely a lot of pride on the line, and we've got some prizes and stuff like gift cards and things like that. But yeah, in terms of doing support and being engaged with customers, that's one of the things that we talk about really early on in the interview process. One of the things that attracts a lot of people to the company. It's just like everyone wants to have an impact, and everyone wants to know that they're building something that's valuable to people. The simplest, like most impactful way to do that is to literally deploy something and get an email from somebody right away who says like, "Hey, thank you. That was awesome." Or hear firsthand like, "Oh man, like I just ran into this bug." Engineer hops in and in 5 minutes just can say, "Hey, we'll refresh the page. Like I just fixed that for you."
Wow.
And just hear that gratitude that they have on the other side.
Yeah. What are some products and services that you use to help you get to market faster?
Man, I kind of queued you up for that one, huh? Yeah, so early on, one of the things that we tried to do is we tried to just outsource the things that are not our core competencies to people who do a lot better. Right? So I'm a front-end engineer. Appcues is very front-end heavy. It's a content creation tool. And the thing that it really didn't necessarily need is didn't need a back-end. I wasn't strong in back-end. And so we use a service like Firebase. We actually use a service called Firebase, which is a back-end as a service. It let us build really fast and made sure that every line of code that we wrote was customer-facing code because it was all just front-end. The funny thing about like front-end versus back-end, like back-end people typically tout how hard their challenges are. But if you ask people what the product is, they always point to a front-end, right? Like nobody points to a database. Nobody points to like a graph of things going from like 10 to 0. It's always the front end. And by using Firebase, by using this other service called Keen, and like a bunch of other third-party tools, we've just been able to focus on things that customers can touch and feel and interact with and actually see value from, and not worrying about, schemas and data structures and latency, all that other stuff that customers don't actually care about. They just kind of expect it to work. And Firebase and Keen have teams of engineers who can make those things work, which is great.
Nice. While building Appcues, what are some things that you've had to ask for help for?
Oh man, a lot of stuff. Me personally, this is my first time, as a founder, CEO. I lean on friends and peers for a lot of advice. So, the guys over at Wistio have been awesome, kind of like a second home to me. When I was first getting started, they let me work out of their office for free. It's just kind of it was really nice to go from working from my house by myself, in the dead of winter, to being in an office with other people who are also working, who are having a good time and showing you that there's more to life, which is kind of cool. People like Patrick from Price Intelligently, who is building an awesome business and is just relentless, looking at him and just the levels that he's at in terms of expertise in his field just makes it man, I can do that. I want to do that. Just getting advice from other people, it's always key.
You had a blog post titled "Fake It Till You Fail." Can you explain what that was and what it means?
Yeah. I think actually I've been talking with a lot of people, and the whole premise of that one was just that so many people, particularly in startups, just, are afflicted by posturing. They sort of they believe that if they just say everything's going well, and say that everything's going good, like that's actually going to eventually lead them to success. And I think in a lot of cases, not being honest with yourself, especially not being honest with your partners, who could be your business partners, it could be your investors, it could be your customers, explicitly lying to those people can just completely ruin your business, right? Because, being dishonest with your investors, who are there to give you help, who are like invested with you, or your business partners, is kind of just not doing yourself a service, right? These people are there to help you, and you're not letting them. And, so when I meet with other founders, the founders I really gravitate towards, and have great relationships with are the ones who I can be real with. I do my best, even if it's somebody who's, not going through the same things, even if it's somebody who, may already be pretty intimate with our business, just do my best to be honest, and just say how things are actually going, and not sugarcoating anything. So yeah, that's been my outlook.
Yeah, I talked with Sam Saltis of Core DNA, and he said pretty much along the same lines, the same thing of not putting on this front of, things are going great, even if they're not. I gave this example of asking someone, how are you doing? And they say, great. And he says, have you made any money this month? And they say, no.
Yeah.
It's like you can ask people for help if you need it. You don't have to say things are going really well when they're not.
Yeah. I think the best ones, the ones that I laugh at the most are ones where, you ask somebody, what's your biggest challenge right now? And they always cite, some challenge that's like a good problem to have, or like, oh man, I can't figure out just where to spend money, or, oh, we're just growing too fast. Like, I can't possibly spend all these, millions of dollars that we're making. It's like, yeah, whatever. Everybody's got some hard problem that's keeping them up at night, at least at some point. And, I think that people can just get help from other people if they're just honest about that.
So going off of that, what would you say is your biggest challenge right now?
Oh man, I think it's really alignment. We're a bigger team than I've obviously ever managed before. I've never managed a team. I had 2 interns one time for like a summer when I was at HubSpot. And me individually, I'm actually a really individualistic person. I think people who've worked with me in the past know that. So like we've got 15 people as of yesterday, and just getting everybody on the same page. It's very different from the way that we used to do that when we were 3 people or 7 people. And so, it's just more meetings, which is something that I was always trained to be allergic to, especially, coming from engineering. You probably know, like your engineers must hate getting into meetings.
Yeah.
So like meetings are important, like communication is important. Saying things over and over and over again, even if you've already said them, super important. So yeah, I think like it's something I'm learning. And, I think, when people are actually like put in a room, and we can talk about all the same things, like we can get all aligned, like the draft, everybody gets really excited and that energy lasts for a while. But I have to constantly, and Jackson has to constantly like remind, keep everybody focused. In a lot of ways, it could be a full-time job.
How valuable is transparency to you in an organization?
Yeah, so we do these things. We made the decision really early on to do a couple things. One of them is transparent salaries within the company and transparent equity. And the way that we instilled those was with salary and equity bands and formulas. So we've got, I think, 4 different salary bands, and there's actually sub bands within those. That's basically just says like, if you are at this skill level, you make this much money, for this role. So if you're an engineer and you're like an intermediate, 3 to 5 years or something, you make X amount of money. And we do something very similar with equity, where based on your start date, based on your seniority, based on like how many other people are in the company, we just kind of punch all those numbers in, and this is the equity you get. And it's been super helpful in a couple of ways. Like it just weeds out all the people who are in it for the money or in it for the equity.
Yeah.
Particularly for equity. In fact, what we found is that there's a lot of emotional attachment to equity when really not very many people know what it means. Everybody thinks like, oh, equity, like that's how I get rich, so I need 10 points. And it's like, if you actually do the numbers or you actually like do research on it, nobody gets 10 points, right? Mm-hmm. Founders get 10 points. Nobody else after that, unless the cap table is being poorly managed or you're an investor, gets that much equity. And so there's a lot of emotional attachment around like the percentages. There's a lot of emotional attachment around like, am I getting more than someone else? That kind of stuff. And what we ultimately want is like, we want to have real negotiations around responsibility. We want to have negotiations around like the value somebody brings and the impact. We want to like test that stuff. We don't want to test how much money do you want to make? How can you make the most amount of money, or what's your ability to negotiate equity or understand it? And so by having those bands, it really takes that conversation off the table and lets us actually gauge for fit and technical and cultural fit.
Mm-hmm. Buffer does something very similar with the transparency. Have you seen that?
Yeah. So we basically cribbed a lot of that stuff from Buffer.
Okay.
And what we found is that like, yeah, it definitely takes the negotiation stuff off the table. I think that stuff's been super helpful, and Buffer's written about that too.
Yeah, they have some great posts about it.
Yeah. And one of the things that really got us to adopt it is that from day one, we knew that we wanted to focus on diversity and make that something that was really important to us. In the workforce, one of the biggest challenges, particularly for women and minorities, is that they're just paid less than their counterparts, right? Especially in tech, which over-indexes in white males, right? Being able to have equal salaries for equal work, equal skill levels, just made a lot of sense to us. And so, that on top of all the other reasons made copying Buffer's formulas really attractive to us.
Yeah, it's interesting because like even as someone outside of Buffer, right, I can go in and I can see how much somebody in this position is making and what equity they have, and they have like a little calculator where you could like do it on your own and see what you would make if you worked there, for example, right? It's really interesting.
Yeah.
So what has been one of the toughest lessons for you to learn running your own company?
That I can't do everything, I would say. Being very individualistic, and it's very easy to like want everything done your way. And there are a lot of things that like I'm probably faster at doing than other people. But if I'm doing them, it means that somebody else isn't doing them, and that I'm robbing them of responsibility or undermining their responsibility. And also like stealing their chance to learn or get better at it. And if I'm doing something like that, if I'm doing things that are tactical, I'm probably also ignoring things like alignment, which is a huge problem, right? And just something you constantly have to be focused on. So just realizing that I can't do everything, I shouldn't be doing everything. And that if I am, I'm doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm. So now I want to move into our rapid fire questions. So what's another startup in Boston that you're most excited about?
I'm actually really excited about Patrick Campbell's company, Price Intel. He's acquired just an amazing team. The problem that they're solving, people might say it's unsexy. He's trying to help people just make more money by optimizing their retention, by optimizing their economics. And they get really deep into the nitty-gritty of stuff. But they're the only ones thinking about that stuff at the same level that he is. I've seen some insights into sort of the future of the product. And Patrick is just an unstoppable force. So I'm really excited about their future.
Awesome. We're here in the Fenway area. So what is your favorite restaurant and bar?
I really love sake. I probably have sake like once a week. So I'm really into sake. Hojoko down the street.
Okay.
They're in the Verb Hotel. They're relatively new to the area. They have a really awesome sake menu. They actually have sake on draft. I know, which is crazy. Wow. So they're a great spot.
Awesome. What's something about you that most people don't know?
I think most people don't know that I'm allergic to chicken and fish.
Wow.
Yeah, I have some weird... I don't know what it is.
Anyone being allergic to chicken.
Yeah, most people don't believe me. Both me, my dad, and my younger brother are allergic to poultry, pretty much. And any red meated fish, so tuna, swordfish, things like cod and that kind of stuff are fine. But it's some protein in that's common in all of them or something. I've gone to the doctor for it before. And I was basically like, Doc, I should take an allergy test. I'm allergic to these two things. And he's like, you could pay $1,000 or so and take this test. Like, they're probably just going to tell you to avoid chicken and fish, which is what you already know. He's like, so it's probably not worth the money.
So you can eat like red meat, just not red fish?
Yeah, so like beef is fine. I actually get the same allergy to like pork. I can eat small amounts of all this stuff, by the way. Like, I'm not going to die. I just get this like really weird tingly feeling in my arms. It's kind of like a niacin flush, if you ever had like niacin. But so it's not like life-threatening or anything. It's just a weird thing.
Fascinating. Do you have any favorite blogs or books?
I just started picking up The Advantage. One of my recent favorite books, Lean In, Sheryl Sandberg. It's one of those that's been on my list for a long time, and I always heard good things about it, and I think it really lives up to it. I think anybody in tech, particularly if you're managing somebody or thinking of managing somebody, should read the book, just because it gives great insight into sort of like the problems with women in tech right now, and even sort of the psychology of women in the workforce in general, that especially as men we totally overlook or take for granted.
What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Loosen up. I think when I was 20, I was a junior in college. I think and even for the first couple of years of starting Appcues, I took everything really seriously, and it was I never really thought about just like enjoying life, having fun, or I did in like weird ways, like sort of like thought fun only came if you worked hard. And now I think that they really should go hand in hand. Like, if you are working hard, like that should be really fun. And if it's not, it's because the work that you're doing sucks and you shouldn't be doing it. You should be doing something that you do find fun. So yeah, I would say like have more fun.
A couple of last questions here to close out. Where can people find out more about Appcues?
They can go to appcues.com, where they can find out all of our content and all our articles, how to get good at user onboarding, or they can reach out to me directly, Jonathan@appcues.com.
All right. That was going to be my next question, where people can reach you. Do you have any parting thoughts, advice, or suggestions for the audience?
I would say if you are a founder or aspiring founder particularly, just kind of worrying about, should you do it? How do you get customers? Do I need a co-founder? Sort of all this stuff. I would say just jump and do it. The market's never been better for and more amenable to starting a company. Especially if you're an engineer, you've got nothing to lose. It's a great hiring economy right now for engineering. Just do it. And even if you're unprepared, you're always going to be unprepared. I'm doing things every single day that I've never done before. So it's constantly learning.
We'll leave it there. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, please go and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes and write a review. By subscribing, you'll get all of my new episodes automatically fresh onto your podcast app. So make sure to do so, and it really helps me out in the rankings and with acquiring new users. Remember, all show notes can be found at startupbostonpodcast.com. Thank you for listening, and until next time, if you have any feedback, ideas for guests, or just want to say hi, you can reach me at nick@startupbostonpodcast.com. That's NIC@startupbostonpodcast.com. Cheers.